When you're ready, John. Some of you have talked about this subject at various times in your life. I feel the subject is money, assets, property. A lot of you know of the seizures that have gone on in this country for the last several years, totally unconstitutionally. But of course, as you know, also we're not operating under Constitution because executive orders have replaced it. But nevertheless, there are ways to protect what you have. And that has always been a subject of rather intense interest on at least quite a few of you. So I'm here today to introduce Phyliss Irvin, who had what might be called a minor mishap in her life about 26 years ago. She married Stan Irvin. And he will, I think, be the one that introduces her. He's the one who's standing up here in this continental suit. But they've been through the mill and they've paid dues, pretty heavy dues. So they speak from experience. And they also speak in non-lawyer type terms that all of us can understand, and they've made it work. And I'm proud to now to introduce Stan Irvin and Phyliss Irvin and welcome them to Denver this morning.
Thank you, Dean. You know, you just took me by surprise. It's not going to be too long, it will be 26 years. Let's just don't step it up any further than it's going already. Okay, well, we're out here today basically to inform you to what's happened to us. And I know we've talked to a lot of you folks over the phone at different times and been wanting to know what in the world we were doing. And of course, we had a lot of our neighbors also wondering what we was doing. There's a lot of times I wonder what I'm doing. But the situation we have here is the fact that we're out here to lay out what happened to us. I was in the fertilizer business for 26 years. I was in the fertilizer and chemical business, and I know that, boy, a lot of you people sitting around behind some of these tables or booths probably just shudder to the things that I used to do, and I did do that because we were highly involved in the chemical business, fertilizer business. I did not know that I was responsible for making you people sick, such as we are, and they are today. But also people are beginning to wake up to the fact that there is other alternative things, there's other alternative medicines. And I'll have to admit, the first time I came to one of these meetings that I thought that you was all a bunch of fruits and nuts. My wife, when she went to the first meeting and come home and told me about it, I didn't know for sure exactly where she'd been or where she'd come from or where she was going. Stuck me going into the next meeting. I did. I met Dean Stonier. And of course, after meeting Dean Stonier, after you meet Dean Stonier one time, you never forget him. But we are out here today to lay out what happened to us. And it was not fun. And you know, one thing about it, that Janet Meisinger had kind of informed me to what maybe some of my problems was last night. I wasn't sure just exactly what it was, but when she brought out this one, it says here, I have PMS and a handgun and any more questions. And you know, I thought I was just fighting the judicial system when we was going through all the domestic situations we were dealing with and all the judicial problems we were having because Mama used to pick on me. Of course, last night I found out also that she was going to bed, and I informed her that she was going to bed with royalty last night. So we're out here to kind of get things informed, and a lot of us get into trouble, and we don't know that we're in trouble. What did you folks think of the Charles Collins speech last night? Or yesterday? Well, folks, now and I know there's people out here that's got lots and lots of different issues. We all do. I do. But if we don't bring this country back to the Constitution, forget everything that you're out there to pound for. I've known this man since he started. I know him very well. He's been at our home several times. We've had a lot of discussions around the breakfast table. Lots of late evening discussions, and I'm telling you what, folks, let's start paying attention. And one thing we've got to do is absolutely get out here and get people woke up to the fact that we've got a problem. And let's quit being brain dead. That's the main thing that we're looking at. You know, they're playing another game on us right now, and you're probably not aware of it. As you know, the wheat price went up to $6, $7.04 in one area. How many people in here are farmers such as ourselves? I know one. Wheat went up to $7.04. And as you know, what's the price of bread here in town? What's a loaf of bread worth today? $2. $2, okay. Now the market's, and it's been going up, right? Now the market's starting to go the other direction. I don't know if you're aware of this or not. Well, we're kind of in another trap that started our trap that we got into. But what had happened is the fact is that we started talking about one thing, which we did have, and there's no question about it. It was looking very bad this spring. The wheat crop looked horrible. But it's not as near as bad as we thought it was. And of course, there's a lot of people trying to capitalize on the fact of food shortage, food shortage, food shortage. Yes, there probably is going to be one, but the main reason it's going to be one because they're going to be putting people off the farm that can't produce. That's the number one factor right there. If we aren't there to produce, folks, you're not going to eat. And when we get to this corporate structure and corporate farming, folks, that's exactly where we're at.
How much wheat was sold at $7.04?
Not very much.
Not very much. I had a chance to do it, but I was too stupid. I was going to wait for 8. Greed. We did, I think, sell at $6.59 is what we finally ended up doing. It was just because of the fact that we were fortunate enough to be able to travel across the country and be seeing some of the things and being acquainted with people across the country that's in these different areas that are having problems. This fall, we've got in the areas that I've been in, to be honest about it, we have got a bumper crop coming on in corn. And I know you've been hearing things otherwise, but I also know I've talked to people all over the country. But if this HARP thing is working like they say it is, I don't know for sure we're going to harvest that crop. Because it is, if we get into a freeze, we're in trouble. And I'm telling you, I don't care what happens, I don't care what kind of business you folks are in, but if we do not figure out some way to start generating this money inside this United States, in the boundaries of the United States, I'm telling you, we're in trouble. And that's where we're at. So this is why I'm behind Charles Collins, folks. Believe you me, I appreciate everything that everybody's thinking. But if we don't get behind one particular issue and stand there, folks, we've had it. And this may be the last time. This may be the last time that we're going to get to vote. So let's be thinking about this. Let's get real. Let's wake up. I know there's a lot of people out here that's brain dead. But I think there's more people in here that's got more gray matter working between the ears than any place else at any other organizations you go to. Even though I did think you was all a bunch of fruits and nuts. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get lined out here, and you're going to see how I was used and abused as we was going through this thing. And fortunately enough for my wife, that she's one of these people that can take a 600-page law book and read it from cover to cover and tell you everything, or tell you what's in it, page per page. I can't, nor do I even want to. But she had to, because I created the problem that she had to get the education for to get us out of. So I'm going to let her get into this thing, and we'll probably mention a few of the moments we had our problems with. And I hope we don't get into an argument up here. We'll try not to. So I'm going to turn this over to Phyliss, and then we'll go from there. And also our booth is over there right along where all of the Heartland exhibits are at Smoky Valley. If you want us to do a workshop, we will. It's just up to you. If you want to just sit and visit in private and what have you, we'll be more than willing to do that. It doesn't make any difference to us. We're just out here to learn like you folks are. So I'm going to turn this over to Phyliss, and Phyliss, tell them what kind of problem I created, okay?
Well, he did create a problem, believe me. What he didn't tell you was that we farm. We also had a fertilizer business in 5 states. We had over 35 employees that we were trying to keep up with. And we got involved with the agriculture movement clear back in the 70s. Well, the agriculture movement probably was the greatest thing that ever happened for us. But at the time, it was terrible. We thought it was terrible. We didn't want to go to Washington, D.C. I hadn't left anything up there I wanted to go back for. So anyway, we ended up in Washington, D.C. While we were there, we ended up being locked in the USDA building. We got in there and on purpose because we wanted to find out what they were up to. Needless to say, when we got in there and we spent the night in there, we had one heck of a night. We used our copy machines, we used our stationery, but the bad part about it was that they had set our price of grain for the next 5 years. They had also set the price of our diesel fuel for the next 5 years. They had also set the rate of interest that we were going to pay for the next 5 years. And needless to say, while we were there was a newspaper came out, and I'm sure most of you know about it, and it's called The Spotlight. Big letters right across the top. Diesel fuel, $1 a gallon. Interest rates, 18%. And we knew that we were in trouble. He made the statement to me, he says, if it goes to that, we're out of business. At that point in time, we were rolling over several $1 million at a shot. He was running fertilizer business in 5 states. It didn't take long to pump out several $1 million worth of fertilizer. Payroll was enormous. Equipment was enormous. Our bank, our local bank, couldn't handle our account. What they had to do was farm it out to another bank in Kansas City that was big enough to handle us. So needless to say, when they said 18% interest, we knew we were in trouble big time. And it was true. When we no more got home, and we had a call from our local banker, and he wanted to see us. All these years, we'd always operated on what you call open notes. We had never had to put up any collateral. We just continually rolled our notes. We'd borrow, then we'd pay. We'd borrow, then we'd pay. They cornered us, and they wanted collateral. And we were not going to give them collateral. So as it ended up, we gave them some collateral with the promise that they were going to stay with us and work with us. Well, people lie. Bankers lie, attorneys lie. But we didn't know this. This was in the early 70s. This is before any of you ever got your feet wet. And we didn't know where we were headed. We hadn't the slightest idea. If we would have, we'd have probably sold out and went to town. But we didn't know where this thing was going. Well, in the meantime, we gave them some collateral, and we still were continuing to operate as usual. About six months down the road, the banker called us in again. And this time they wanted a barnyard mortgage. They wanted it all, including the kitchen table. And we weren't going to give it to them. So we got into one big battle. They says, that's okay, we'll just foreclose on you. You're the largest farmer in Ellis County. And he said, we'll just make an example of you. He said, we'll be able to take the rest of them out easier. Made me mad. And when you make me mad, I kind of get ornery. So I put my feet down. I put my feet flat on the floor and says, if you think you're big enough to foreclose, you better go right ahead and do it. And they did. They thought they were big enough, so they did. Newspaper article right across the top, largest foreclosure in our county. Man, don't you think our neighbors didn't wonder what was going on, and our family hit the ceiling? I mean, they just absolutely, they've never had any kind of entanglements like that with bankers, lawyers, or anybody else. When it all came down, we ended up having 86 attorneys involved. We spent $650,000 in attorney's fees. We had $670,000 in attorney's fees from the state of Kansas to California and back again. I removed one judge from our case. Today he is nothing but a divorce lawyer. We finally got him voted out. He is gone. He won't look at us when we go into the courthouse because he hates us so bad. When he was interviewed by the local newspaper, they wanted to know why he thought that he had been voted out of office. He says, I crossed the wrong people. He did. We went to work, we got all of our people involved, and we got rid of him. This judge happened to have a note in the same bank I was in, which was a conflict of interest. He should have stepped down. He wouldn't do it. I had to legally remove him from the case. But it didn't end there. We spent $650,000 in attorney's fees. I ran 2 Chapter 11 bankruptcies in 2 cities, one in Wichita, Kansas, and one in Topeka. I ran 2 of them simultaneously. Don't try it. It's hard. After the $670,000, I couldn't afford any more attorneys. So I had to take the case on myself. So that's when I started to learn what the law was all about. Needless to say, the judge, the bankruptcy judge, the one federal bankruptcy judge was quite a character. He'd let me have pretty much control of the courtroom when I'd go in. And it was really amazing because I thought that he would, kick me out so fast that my head would swim. But one day he watched me slam dunk 2 FDIC lawyers. And he sat up there on the podium and laughed. And of course, all the attorneys in the gallery were all poking each other and laughing because they knew that I was not an attorney. All the way down through all this thing, I fought this thing all the way through. We'd been involved in the legal system for well over 15 years. I cried. I was sick at my stomach. You cannot imagine all of the feelings that you're going to go through.
She picked on me?
I picked on him. Yes, I don't know how the marriage ever held together because we did. I'd be crying and bawling and squalling going to one of their hearings, and we had to drive 400 miles. And I'd go to one of their hearings, and I'd bawl and squall all the way, and he'd just tell me to shut up. So anyway, it got to the point, though, when I'd take him to the hearings that the judge would want to try to throw him over into the clink, and he'd never say a word. They always wanted to do a contempt charge on him. So I started leaving him at home. It was easier to go in and do it myself and leave him at home. So we fixed this partnership up. He went on, continued to work so that he could make the money so that I could continue to fight. And I did the fighting. It was a partnership. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what this thing has to be. If you end up in a situation like this, it has to be a partnership. Don't be pulling apart. Don't be working each other over. Make it a partnership so that you can win. I had federal marshals. Federal marshals came to our farm to pick me up one time because I refused to go back to any one of their 341 hearings. What had happened was the trustee had ended up falsely imprisoning me. We always had 341 hearings in the top of the post office building in Topeka. They'd always clean out the courtroom before they'd ever let me go in, because they didn't want anybody else to know that they didn't need an attorney. So they would always clean out the courtroom for me, so when I'd go in. Well, one evening he helped me back until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And by that time, I was pretty aggravated with him to start with, so we get in there, and of course I'd learned to answer his questions with a question. I didn't ever answer him the way he ever wanted to be answered. So I kept watching the clock, and it became 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock rolls around, and I'm still 400 miles from home by myself. So, I look up at this, and this is enough. And so I started packing my briefcase and picking up my stuff, and he says, well, what are you doing? I said, I'm going home. He says, I didn't say you could go. I didn't ask you if I could go. So I get up and I walk out, and I go out into the hallway. The elevators has been shut off, the doors have all been locked, and I'm locked in on this top floor and can't get off of it. About this time, I walk across down one of the hallways, and I run across a fella that's about 6'5", great big fella. And I'm looking up at him, and I said, do you work here? And he said, yes. I said, can you get me off of this floor? And he said, yes. I said, great. So we go back to the elevators. He turns on the elevators, and I get on, but he gets on too. I thought, maybe I've jumped out of the frying pan into the fire, So I beginning to wonder maybe I shouldn't have been in this position at all. And about that time, the trustee walks out and gets on the elevator. Well, I wasn't scared of him. So, man, I got out of there as fast as I could go. But I refused to go back to any more of their 341 hearings. Within about a month and a half, I had a federal marshal standing on our doorstep, and he was wanting to take me back to Topeka, Kansas. And this is always on a Friday night. They always get you on a Friday night so they can hold you over all weekend, because you can't get an attorney, you can't get a judge. So I told him I wasn't going. And he said, why? And I proceeded to tell him that I had been falsely imprisoned and I wasn't going to go. He said, and fortunate for me, I happened to know this gentleman. He said, I'm going to go call the judge and tell him what happened. I said, you go tell the judge what happened. So he came back and he said, you be in court on Monday morning. And so we had been trying to get out of this bankruptcy for a year, well, about 3 years. But they wouldn't let us out because they'd already walked through a corporation that held $1,500,000 worth of assets. They knew there was a trust involved that held $1,200,000 worth of assets, and they had not been able to get into that trust in the 12 years that they had been pounding on us. 2 federal judges had tried to break the trust, one clear back in Kansas, and one in the state of Washington. Neither one of them could break the trust. They had already collected $750,000 worth of accounts receivable and had not paid any of the bills. I kept trying to get accounting out of this bankruptcy court, could never get any accounting out of the bankruptcy court as to whom had been paid. The IRS was a priority claim with us. The IRS was never paid. The IRS attacked us even after we had been discharged from the bankruptcy court because the trustee had not paid the claim. So I was still putting paperwork into the bankruptcy court even after I had been discharged for several years afterwards, trying to get accounting. But in the meantime, you know, our lives go on, our children grew up. I never had a chance to raise my children because I was always at the computer or I was at the typewriter, I was always doing paperwork or I was always learning. So when they couldn't get into the trust and they finally falsely imprisoned me, that was my opening. This is when I went for a discharge and the judge said yes. He said, you will have your discharge papers. They no longer wanted anything to do because they knew I was getting ready to come back after him and the trustee, both of them. So he wanted rid of me as fast as he could get rid of me. If it hadn't been for the fact that the trustee stumbled and made a mistake, we would probably still be in that bankruptcy court. I know of people that have been in there for 20 years and they have never been released because they've got assets offshore. They've got money and assets offshore that they can't get a hold of, and they think they will be brought back into the country sooner or later. So in the meantime, I had been in Washington, D.C. We got caught in an elevator with a couple of senators. The Kennedy family had just had the accident with the Kopechne girl. And that was the talk of the town. You know, the Kennedy family is going to be, lose everything they ever thought of having because they were going to be sued by the Kopechne family. These 2 senators reared back and laughed great big, and they said, no, the Kennedy family will lose nothing. And they were right. He says the Kennedy family has over 2,200 trusts. He said they have one building downtown that houses all of their trust people. And he said they'll lose nothing. And if you remember, if you read the papers, because I really hung into the papers in Washington, D.C. because we were there, to see if there was anything came out of this. There wasn't. The Kopechne family got the insurance from the car. That's all they got. Okay? Because of the trust. So this is when I started tracking across country. I spent years across country trying to learn everything I could learn about common law, trusts, anything, because trusts are common law. Property and trusts are dealt with under common law. In the meantime, all of this legal situation that we were in has forced me to go in and really get a formal education. I am now a certified paralegal. But I did that because when I do meetings like this, somebody's going to say, what's your credentials? All I could say, housewife. And I was happy at that.
You don't need them anyway.
I was happy at that. So I went ahead and took my training, and I am a paralegal, and I'm certified in trusts and wills. But the trusts that we do, or that we've had, don't even resemble a statutory trust. And this is what I want to get into now. You've got the background. I want to go into the training part on trust and what can happen and what we've done. At one time, we were also operating in the state of Iowa. and he was cutting corn up there, and he had 4 combines and 2 four-wheel drive tractors and 2 grain carts and 4 semis. We had semis running in 48 states, very high liability situation. One evening while he was moving the equipment and a car came up over a hill and he wouldn't stop. He just kept coming. Well, when he came up over the hill, they were on ice about 4 inches thick. It was terrible, cold. And this car hit his brakes and he slid this car or pickup off of a ravine. We had insurance, of course, and so I turned it over to the insurance company. They litigated it out. We were sued for an unlimited judgment. Does anybody know what an unlimited judgment means? Everything you've got.
Exactly.
And so we were sued for an unlimited judgment. And the attorney for the insurance company told me this, and I said, what does that mean? I already knew what it meant. He says they can take the clothes off your back and the food out of your cabinets. I said, thanks, I really don't appreciate this, because the guy had just wanted a pickup, a new pickup. We'd never had any claims. We've spent $65,000 a year for insurance for the farming operation. So we were well covered. We had $1.5 million umbrella. It's an umbrella coverage. For them to sue us for an unlimited judgment was a little bit out of line. So anyway, they litigated for two years. At the end of 2 years, while we got into depositions, once they got into depositions and they found out that we didn't own anything, they settled. They settled for the price of a pickup, $22,000 once again. So let me tell you, I kept thinking that once we got through all of these litigations and all this stuff, that things would quiet down and I could go back to being a housewife and enjoy my family. Just didn't seem that that was going to be the case whatsoever. And it's continued on. There's people who would like for me not to tell you what you can do and how you can do it. They would like to stop me. Lots of them, they have tried, but I can still teach. And that's what we're doing. We're still teaching. So as long as we can teach, we're going to teach you what you can do. And like everybody has been telling, you're going to have to take responsibility for yourselves, because there's no one out there going to do it for you. The attorney, $670,000 worth of attorneys, and they couldn't do it for me. And I managed, a lowly little housewife managed to salvage $1,200,000 worth of assets that they couldn't do. Give me a break. Go back and start taking control of your own life and your own assets and start learning. It's important. You've got to. Because no one else wants to go through what we went through, and I don't want you to. It's terrible. You don't want to have to live the way that we had to live. So learn. You've got to learn. Okay, let's bring up on the...
You're going to have to step in the front.
I'll step over here. Can you still hear me on the mic? Okay. Okay, go clear down. Now this is a little old book that I happened to get in the mail. They were soliciting our business. And it's called Straight Talk, and it's the Dolans. And it's just a little old book just giving you lots of little old tips. It's really easy to read, not much to it, but it's real easy to read. But they had something that was interesting. Clear down here onto the bottom, it says avoid estate taxes on your insurance proceeds. Buy a life insurance policy inside an irrevocable life insurance trust. Now when you go into an attorney, generally all that they're ever going to sell you or write for you will be a living trust. It will be a revocable or revocable. They will not write you an irrevocable trust or an irrevocable trust unless they can write it in as an insurance trust. This is some of the stuff that you've really got to watch for, because the revocable trust is fine if you just have a car and a house maybe. But if you have some assets, it's not going to protect the assets. All the revocable trust will do is keep you you're going to avoid probate. That's all it's going to do for you. It's not going to protect your assets. They can walk through those trusts and take everything that you've got if you happen to have one of them. Okay, next one. Now we have another book. Now I have been all over the United States. I've been into Canada. I've been all over the country trying to find information. Information is very, very difficult to find on trusts. This gentleman wrote this book. He is an attorney. He does have a PhD in law. It's Asset Protection Secrets. And he has told some truths. And so this is the only thing that I can tell you that I have actually found that is of any value out here. You could go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I have spent a lot of dollars trying to find something that I could bring out to you to teach you with. Arnold Goldstein. We have a few. We don't have many because they're hard to get. They're real hard to get. So we try to keep a few with us when we travel. So if you're interested, why, we do have them over at our booth.
He was also reprimanded for writing it.
Yeah, he was reprimanded by the Bar Association for writing the book. So they don't want you to know. That's hard to imagine, isn't it? Another little tip that was in here that I thought you all might be interested in, I'm sure most of you bank somewhere. You all have a bank account someplace. And I found it real interesting that they are telling us, how do I work this? There, I got it. Okay, sorry to be the ones to tell you folks, but you're making your bank rich. Like us, you probably noticed that banks have a fee for everything nowadays. Minimum balance fees, ATM fees, service fees. And on top of that, the banking crisis is not over. We may be in store for more failures and closures. More than 300 banks are still on the FDIC's problem list. Also, if you look right down here, they have the telephone number where you can call to check if your bank is solvent or not.
Did you read that off? Read the phone number.
It's 1-800-44-BANKS. Banks.
Four banks.
B-A-N-K-S.
No, B-A-N-K.
No, it's B-A-N-K-S. That's 5-5. So it's 4 then B-A-N-K-S. I have an economist that told us that at one time that he felt that probably the banks would go down to about 25. And if you'll notice, they are still merging. They're still doing it. They're still going in and out. So they said when it's said and done, they're probably somewhere around 25 by the time it's all over with. So I got caught in 3 bank closings, and I guarantee you don't want to do that. FDIC is not a nice person or a nice outfit to deal with. And their attorneys are even worse. So I got the privilege of dealing with some of their attorneys. Okay, now what we like to deal with, you can go on to the next one. We like to work with irrevocable trusts. We like to work with Nevada corporations. And probably the most often questions that we probably have and ask is, well, can I put my house in trust if I still owe money on it? Yes, you can. You can put the equity of your house payments, what you've paid in on your house is the equity, that can go into trust. The next most asked question is, what about the taxes? Do I still have to pay taxes for doing this? No. And this is where this came right out of my paralegal book. And it says here, another distinguishing feature of a trust as opposed to a sale is that consideration, you know where it says $10 or any other consideration on your deeds? That consideration, payment to the settler based on the trust property's reasonable value, is not required for the creation of a trust. In other words, by placing property in trust for the beneficiary, the settler does not require the beneficiary to pay for the transfer. A trust is a gratuitous transfer of property. Consideration is not necessary. And every time that we get involved with somebody trying to move property, they always are afraid that they're going to have to go back and redo taxes or have a new self-assessment. It is not. It's a gratuitous transfer to the trust. Okay? Next one. And I don't know if we can even see this. The source of most of our laws pertaining to property, trusts, and agency, the relationship is under common law. Most always, anything to do with property and to do with trust is under common law. Now, Jan Meisinger and a lot of us have been working very, very hard on common law. We want to go back to our common law. And we already are still there under trusts and under property rights. So that, you know, we're where we want to be. It's just that we got to get the rest of this judicial system moved over and get it back to where it's honest. Okay. Okay, next one. Okay, now when we were involved in the automobile accident with the insurance companies, of course, when Stan went up for the depositions, I gave Stan what he needed to go with, only what he needed to go with. And one of them was the titles to the vehicles. Now, if you will notice, this is a Kansas title, and as you all well know, you don't own that vehicle, you're just renting it. Everybody knows that. So anyway, this is a certificate of title from Kansas. And right here is the name of the trust. Now, SciTech Trust is the one that 2 federal judges tried to break. That was the one that was involved into the bankruptcy that they couldn't get into. So this piece of equipment here is titled under SciTech Trust. That's the way that the vehicle would be titled if you put it into trust. Okay, next one. Okay, now people are telling me that, well, my gosh, I just can't do anything with a revocable trust, and I just can't do anything with my trust. There's all kinds of trusts being sold out here. There's UBOs, there's colladas, there's about anything you can think of is being sold out here right now. And I get calls from all over the United States that people have bought these trusts, and one of them had a UBO out of California. They told him he didn't have to file any income tax on it, and the IRS was tapping him for $400,000. So we run into about everything that you can think of. We have an association of people. I put together a complete association of people that are professional people. I have accountants, I have tax consultants. My tax consultant is not licensed with the IRS so that she can help us do what we have to do, okay? We have stock and bond people, we have financial planners. What we did is put together a whole group to take care of a complete financial picture, because most people need a complete financial picture. But they're calling me up and say, well, I can't do anything with the trust I've got, and we know why they can't do with it, because they don't have the proper documents to go in and work on the statutory side. You have to understand, when you're doing banking and when you're doing financing, when you're doing your cars, trucks, whatever, those are on the statutory side. So you have to have proper documentation to deal on the statutory side. We like to work on the common law side in property, but it's not always possible. Where's the timekeeper so I know what I'm up against? Okay. All right, this here, could you move that down just a dab so I can get right up here at the top? Okay, this is JDFP. That is John Deere Finance. We went in, and when we came out of bankruptcy court, we had no credit left. We had no banks. No banks would touch us after what I did. You know, I ripped them up. I cost them several $1 million. So we had no banks. We had absolutely nothing that we could deal with. And we needed some new equipment on the farm. So I said, okay, we're going to go buy some new equipment with the trust. Stan says, you think you can do that? I said, I don't know, but I'm going to try. So we went into a dealer and told him what we wanted to do. He says, he asked me only one thing. He says, do you have your power of attorney to do business for the trust? I said, you bet I do. He says, all we got to do is figure out what you want. So he went out and picked out a combine, and this combine happened to be $69,000. Total amount of payments was $81,770. That was financed with John Deere credit several years ago. You're going to find that all of the companies, John Deere, Chevrolet, GMAC, Ford, are trusts. You're going to find that the government is a lot of trusts. I'm going to get right on down to them. If I've only got 15 minutes, I got to go. This is what one of the checks would look like. This is a bank account for a SciTech Trust. Okay, in the book, I want to hit on this kind of lightly. It says here, how to create a creditor-proof trust. Okay, now that's in the red book. It says the irrevocable trust is a trust favored in asset protection because it provides a high degree of protection from creditors. Don't let anybody tell you that anything else is going to protect you from creditors. Only an irrevocable trust, and only if it's written correctly. And I'm going to show you that in the court documents here in just a second. The grantor cannot serve as trustee nor appoint as trustee one who is not considered arm's length. Courts closely examine the relationship between grantor and trustee to determine whether the trustee is only the grantor's alter ego. So that means just exactly what it says. You cannot be the trustee. Now, when you have a trust written by an attorney, he's going to make you grantor, trustee, and your kids are going to be beneficiary. Don't expect this to work. It won't work for you. It's written incorrectly if you want asset protection. Okay? Next one. This one here, back again, we figured out here that we wanted to still deal with credit. Now, I try to teach people, get out of debt, stay out of debt. After where I've been, I don't want to be in debt. So, but I had to do something to teach people that it can be done and that we know how to do it. Okay, this one here is a Kansas installment contract with Ford Motor. This was done with our local people. This is Northwest Holding Company, which is a trust who owns a Lincoln Town car that I drive everywhere that I need to go. You don't want it. It's got 125,000 miles on it. It's 2 years old. Go. Next one. But it can be done. We do it every day. I have people that are leasing cars with the trust. Okay, this one here, why your revocable trust offers you no protection. Such trusts are useful for estate and tax planning purposes, but a revocable trust is inadequate for asset protection. Creditors of the grantor can generally reach assets transferred to the revocable trust with the same ease. They can attach assets in the name of the grantor. Because the trust is written with you as the grantor on it, you as the trustee on it, and your kids as beneficiary, that shows ownership. If I'd have had ownership of any of the equipment when we were in the federal bankruptcy court, if the trust had read with Stan and Phyliss Irvin as grantor, Stan and Phyliss Irvin as trustee, they would have got $1,200,000 worth of assets, which they were trying to do. And we could not be beneficiary neither. When they found out that the trustee was in the state of Washington, they had to deal with the trustee of this trust in the state of Washington, that I wasn't the one. All I could say, I had non-disclosure papers filed into the bankruptcy court that I could not talk about the trust. It wasn't mine. I couldn't talk about it. This is what stopped them. This is one of the things that stops them. Okay? And of all of the 150, 200 trusts that I've seen sent into my office where we will look at every trust that comes through, they're generally always written incorrectly. And I had one gentleman that had a UBO written out of California by an attorney. He had a big construction company. The bankruptcy court walked through it, took his construction company and the property that he had on Half Moon Bay, because he and his corporation was the trustee with his daughter. So you have to know how to write these correctly, or you are going to lose it if you get involved in any kind of entanglement like what we happen to always get hit with. Next one. Also, it says add beneficiaries other than yourself to your trust. Use irrevocable trust, not revocable trust. Appoint others to be trustee and not yourself. And we like to use different entities. We like to use trusts. We like to use the Nevada corporations. We use the Nevada corporations an awful lot. So that's another alternative. Nevada has some real nice benefits, and we have a company over there that does a turnkey job for us, and they're real good with what they do. We try to bring in the best people we possibly can. Next one. Okay, now this one, can you push that up to where the bottom? I want to show you. This is a case in Kansas. This was a case with the United States government. It was an SBA loan. Some friends of ours bought a piece of property in town, a little machine shop, and they didn't know it had an SBA loan. They had title insurance on it. Title insurance did not show a former SBA loan that had not been paid off. They went ahead and bought the property. We've found out at a later date that the title insurance company does not have to tell you if there's an SBA loan against the property. It's happened several times. We've had people walk up and say, well, that happened to me too. These people walked from the shop. When they walked from the shop, they were sued by the United States government, SBA. This was a paper that had their grocery list of everything that they were supposed to bring in on a date of execution. to the court so that the attorney could find out what their assets were, so that they could take their assets, sell them, so that they could pay off this SBA loan that they didn't borrow, okay? And this was one of the things that it was really taught us, that we are right on track, we're doing exactly what we're supposed to do, and we're teaching exactly the way we're supposed to teach. All trust agreements in which you or your spouse are named trustor, trustee, or beneficiary. These people walked in with absolutely nothing. They have not had anything. They have not had farmland. They have not had oil income. They have not had stocks, bonds, and annuities in their name for many, many years. They walked in with absolutely no papers. The attorney for the government says, well, he says, if you ever get anything, would you let me know? Don't think so. Don't think we'll ever have anything that's ours, you know. I'm a person, I finally found out, you know, years and years ago, that if I owned it, somebody else wanted it worse than I did. So it's better not to own it. And you know, I get along real well without owning anything. Like I said, I travel in a car that is owned by a trust, paid for by the trust, and I enjoy the heck out of it. So here we go again. This was another one of them. This was real interesting too, because we're teaching these people. You know, we're teaching these people too. We're learning and we're teaching them. And so when this document, this is part of the grocery list. It came from the United States Attorney General, or Attorney's Office here. This one here is all records of any unincorporated business. Now, all these companies out here are selling UBOs, unincorporated business organizations. If they're not written correctly, you'll be hauling your papers into a federal court case again.
Because your name is on it someplace.
Because your name will be on it someplace. Okay, next. Okay, now we deal with the federal government even, because the federal government has all kinds of trusts. So we have farmers. I deal with farmers a lot. Well, we like to do ASCS payments. We have to do all these things to stay in business. But in this particular situation, this gentleman here had a big ranch in New Mexico, several thousands of acres. The Federal Land Bank threw him out. He absolutely had nothing left. They sold the property and then took the capital gains tax and put it back on him. So when they took the capital gains, the tax, and put it back on him, he had a lien against him, so he couldn't even have a bank account. So this guy was really beat. I mean, he was lower than a snake's belly. I told him, I said, you come in, we'll talk, I'll show you what to do. He says, nobody can help me. This is how far down the fellow was. Nobody can help me. I said, when you're ready, come in. 2 years later, he got ready. He was buying and selling cattle up here in Colorado. And to be a buyer, cattle buyer, you have to have certain documents from the government. So he wanted to know. He says, how am I going to get these documents? I said, we're going to apply for them. Well, they're not going to do it in the trust. I said, sure they will. So we started applying. This was after he had made lots of money. And he was capable of buying another ranch up here in Colorado. He decided he didn't want to buy cattle anymore. So this is where that we were terminating our agreement with the United States Department of Agriculture. And of course, this is the Grain and Inspection Packers and Stockyards, and they're very tight. You have to know what you're doing. But this is where that they terminated our agreement after 30 days. Would you go on to the next one, please? Okay, this was one of the things right here. See, trust agreement, trust fund agreement. And they deal with these every day. It's nothing new. It's just that it's new to you, but it's not new to them. And this is just part of the paperwork that we had to fill out and send in to the government. Right over here, we had to send it all into the government. And he had to have a bond. He had to have a $10,000 bond to go with this right here. He says, how am I going to get this bond? I said, we're going to apply for it. He said, they won't give it to us. 2 weeks later, we had a $10,000 bond. Okay, next. Okay, this is his dealer business report. And they're right here on this particular one. I do happen to be the trustee on this. I'm the one who dealt with them people. And down here is his quarterly report. The thing of it is he said, and he knows this packers and stockyards a whole lot better than I do. He said, we got the bond back, we got everything back within about a 2-month period of time. He said, if it hadn't been in the trust, done by the trust, he said, I would have been waiting as high as 2 years, and he said, I would have had to taken all of my banking records, all of the cattle records, everything in to ever get it terminated. We filed 3 pieces of paper for a trust. This one here is a bad, sad story. I'm going to go through it pretty fast. This is an example of what can happen with your living trust, and lots of people have living trusts. This little old lady up here, Otto B. King, she's from Texas, was about 85 some years old. The boys down here, these boys down here that was trustee of the Otto B. King Trust, decided that Mother wasn't capable of taking care of her own business anymore. Mother was examined by a doctor and could take care of her own business. She could do her own banking, she could do her own post office, but they even took her post office privileges away from her, plus her banking privileges. So she goes to her son-in-law, and her son-in-law and daughter decide to help her, and so they are, in fact, right up here, attorney in fact, Norman Saul is her son-in-law. Okay, next, oh, wait. This is the judgment. They came back in, went to court. The judge ruled, this is the judge's ruling on this trust. This trust has already been ruled upon. Judgment has already been given, and Otto B. King is still alive, living in her own home. Slide it up to where I can get clear down here to the bottom, please. Okay, thank you, Bob. Defendant shall, within 10 days of the date of this judgment, deliver to the plaintiff in her individual capacity 1 or more cashier's checks representing 50% of the following accounts. She only got 50% of her accounts. Okay, go to the next one. Okay, the real estate, she had about a $400,000 house and several acres of land with it. The real estate owned by plaintiff and the King Senior Revocable Living Trust, plus the adjacent tracts owned by Elsa, Calvin King, and Robert King, will be listed for sale as 1 unit. So the judge ordered that her home was to be sold. The said real estate broker shall in person be approved by the boys and Otto. Okay, would you push it on up again so that they can see the bottom? After the property is sold and the purchase price received, the sales proceeds shall be divided as followed. 40%, 20%, and Otto only got 20%, and here's her husband's 20%. This was already distributed before the lady ever passed away. Okay, next one. The thing about this, did you see where her daughter got anything? Norman and Dorothy Saul shall be solely responsible for the care and maintenance of Otto B. King throughout the rest of Otto B. King's life. Emmett King, Elsa King, and Robert King shall have no individual financial responsibilities towards Otto King from and after the date of this judgment. That's just some of the things that can happen when you get involved with a living trust. Hopefully it never happens to you. Hopefully everything goes right on. And everything is great and wonderful, but in this particular case it didn't happen that way. These people were calling for help. This judgment's already been down. Only thing else ruled down, it was already brought down. The only thing that those people could do was go back and do an appeal. And I don't have the documents on the appeal, but that was all. And the lady is 80-some years old. Who wants to fight for all of this when you're 80-some years old? Those are golden years, they're supposed to be. Yeah, right. That's okay, we'll go on to the next one. We got the most that we needed. Okay, now this one here, this is the Nevada corporations, and I have people, you know, that are always saying, well, the Delaware corporations can be used also. Yes, they can, but Nevada at this point in time came in with new regs, new rules, new regulations, and they are ahead of Delaware. And so we wanted to use Delaware corporation or Nevada corporations whenever possible. And this is just some of the things. Also, if you've got a big business and you want to retire and you don't want to pay a lot of the taxes, move to some of these states and live in some of these states, because here there are no personal income tax and no for-profit corporation income tax. So, you know, that kind of takes care of some of those situations if you're in a position to do so. If you're not in a position to do so, We like to use the trust, we like to use the Nevada corporations, and we like to do income splitting. And we've been real successful. The accountants and the people that we have doing the taxes and taking care of the taxes for the trust are being real successful. Now I've got people, I work in the Patriot movement, you know, they don't want to do this, they don't want to do that, they don't have a bank account, they can't do this, they can't do that. You can do a lot of things with a trust. A trust can be put into the system, let the trust be the entity in the system, and I don't care what you do with your life. I have a gentleman that lives in Mexico. He's an big old man. He's got a big villa in Mexico with a yacht sitting out in the ocean out there. He don't like the IRS. He's refusing to pay, and he's battling the IRS. He wanted a trust. I said, that's fine, but the trust is going to pay the taxes, going to figure the taxes, because you're looking over your back now, looking for the IRS. You don't want to do it on two entities. So what we do is we have there's real good things that you can do with trust. You'll never catch me stand up here and say, you're not going to pay any taxes. Yeah, you're going to pay taxes. But they may be minimal taxes. There's lots of things that can be done. I have a gentleman that got a hold of us from California. He had an offshore trust. In fact, this offshore trust had been written, several offshore trusts had been written by 2 attorneys and an accountant in Florida. The IRS was knocking on this gentleman's door. They were going to criminally indict him. And we stepped in with one of our tax consultants, and she worked the process out, and we got him back on track, and he is now working right straight. Here in the United States, he's not going to go offshore again. And I guess my time is up. I want to thank Dean and Phyliss and all of their staff. They just do a tremendous job here. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this on?
It's off.